All right, looks like we're live. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, really. Um, Recording the first episode to our Warrior Revolution podcast, and I was kind of inspired today. So, um, through an unfortunate sort of circumstance that's going on, but I thought it'd be a good time, and just now had this idea to do a live video too. So if anybody wants to chime in, you're welcome to. So, hey, what's up, Daniel, Rick? Good to see you guys. I have to find a way on my screen to somehow see both of these. Hold on. We'll make this a little smaller. Boom. Sweet. What's up, Henry? Okay. So I was inspired to make this episode because a parent of mine, well, not a parent of mine, a parent of one of my students has another child that isn't in our program who has been dealing with a bully situation for a period of time. And so I just had to try and chime in to see if I could help at all. And I'm not certain if it was a ton of help, since it's something they've been working on for a long period of time. But it led me to want to make this an episode so we could maybe share some wisdom that I've come across through teaching martial arts. And bullying can be pretty frustrating. As a parent, for instance, um, not really knowing if the school system has a handle on things. If it comes to physical violence, if there's anything going on with, I guess, death threats or anything of the sort, it can be pretty frightening. And you don't have much control over it either. The person that I was just making reference to, I hope it's okay that I'm sharing this in a very generic way, but her daughter has been bullied often to the point where she's even considering changing school systems. And so going to a different school district because of a bully situation is, I would say, a pretty severe circumstance, and it's a real problem that I know has been addressed frequently. So if you're dealing with that, hopefully this content can help you some. So the deal with this too is it hits home for me too by quite a bit. I know when I was a child, through say elementary school, I grew up in the city and I actually fit in quite well. And it was never an issue for me until one day we moved and I was faced with a new group of kids and struggled to really fit in with them. So let's see here. I tried to write some notes down. um, Anyways, it was after I moved and I started getting picked on. It was actually deeply traumatic of an experience. And I remember constantly going home and talking with my mom about it and having all sorts of ways of trying to figure out how to overcome the bullying and maintain my sense of self-esteem as well. And middle school for me personally was the worst. It led to some physical violence, some actual fighting. And what really got me was I was trained in Taekwondo when I was pretty young. And I had this imaginative idea that I would be able to help myself. And what happened though was I just got my butt whooped when it came to actually trying to stand up for myself. And so the confidence wasn't there. I didn't know how to communicate effectively with people that were giving me such a hard time, and it was a major challenge for me. I lost a lot of self confidence because of it, and it was very frustrating because I felt like I should be able to handle myself because of my Taekwondo training. Um, when it came towards the end of middle school, though, I started getting into wrestling, which is, I might describe it as more of a combative style martial art. And that was when things really started to turn around, not because of anything I was necessarily saying differently, but I definitely carried myself in a more confident manner, and people just didn't want to fight me. And at that point, I was almost like ready for it. I wanted something to happen, and it never was the case. Nobody wanted to fight after I started wrestling. Besides that, I was so exhausted between school and homework and working and wrestling practice. I never wanted to get into fights. But that's where it really started to help out. And then what really made things click for me was after becoming an adult. And of course, developmentally, when it comes to like our psychology, we handle things in a much different way. But when I started training jujitsu and MMA, that's when it really clicked, and I felt like I could handle myself anywhere I went. Um, there was like this deep instilled sense of self-confidence because it's all based on, for instance, leverage with jujitsu. And there was just felt like there was nothing to fear regardless of where I went. So that's one reason why I'm so passionate about what we do in classes. But when I started actually teaching those things is where it really solidified some different tactics for helping other people get through situations where they're dealing with a bully. So, what comes first to mind when I think about what kids could benefit from the most, I consider the word being assertive. And it's definitely a struggle for a child to learn how to become assertive. They're raised to essentially follow the leader. And then in circumstances where maybe they don't have that same type of guidance, they're sort of left on their own to start to fit in with other kids. Being assertive is a very difficult thing to practice because as a young child, they aren't able to as easily regulate their actions separate from their emotions. But it's a skill like anything else, and something with a little bit of training, anyone at any age could benefit from. So I think helping them practice to have an assertive behavior in many ways will help. And that's where I came up with something I'm now today dubbing the 3 C's. And so, with what we described later, um, we want to encourage them in stressful situations to be calm. We want to encourage them to be confident, all the while they are communicating. And so, calm, confident while communicating. Those are the 3 C's. And so, the calmness, I think, comes from that inner sense of self-esteem and confidence um, that hopefully is being fostered. Um, when it's a real sense of confidence, they don't need to fake anything. They're not trying to impress anyone. They've learned a progressive growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. And so there's no need to get puffed up with ego, essentially. And then the communication part is where role playing and actually practicing these types of circumstances really comes into effect. So I recommend you do practice role playing with your child if you have one. If you're listening to this as a coach, role playing in class too does help. But just one thing that comes to mind is a drill we do sometimes to help remind people how to have the right posture and physiology to reflect being confident. And so, one thing you can do to practice is have your child like ball up and try and look as um, oh, what's the word I use? Shy. Yeah, we just say shy ninja. So they're going to try and look as shy as possible, right? They're going to sort of cover themselves up and shrug their shoulders and look down and look as shy as they can. And then we're going to say, okay, now let's act like we're confident and encourage them to stand up straight, big smile on their face, chest puffed out, looking like they're confident. And then if they can practice going back and forth between the the way their body responds when they feel shy versus when they feel confident, it begins to give them an anchor in order to know when to utilize those different what's the word I want? Well, those different emotions that they can take control of with their physiology. So hopefully that's one thing that helps. But then when it comes to role playing, and this is where we get into not the three C's, but now the three T's. So the three T's, while the last T does involve some martial arts, the first two are still helpful to practice, and even the third one if you want to get into it. So the first T is always to talk to the person that's bullying you. This is where we explain how to do it in an assertive way, that you don't want to be mean to the bully. Um, you don't want to reflect the anger that they're giving towards you, but you do want to stand your ground and tell them that you're not willing for them to treat you that way. Now, maybe it was a miscommunication, and the bully was thought they were being funny and they were just being cool and trying to fit in, and maybe they leave your child alone. But the thing is, if they don't, which could also be the case, step two, which it takes some influencing. The older kids get, they don't want to do step two, but it's a very important step. Step two is to tell. And so we encourage them to tell everyone, telling the teacher, telling the um, principal, telling you as their parent, telling everyone that could be involved to try and help the situation. The last T, though, is to tackle. And we teach them to tackle mentally, which often we explain means with their mind first. And then we teach them to tackle physically second. So you might ask, what do I mean by tackle mentally? It's sort of like a challenge. Your child would, at this point, stand up for themselves, but not be willing to throw the first punch. They would go stand up to the bully and say, all right, that you could even review the first two T's that they followed. You treated me this way, and I asked you to stop. You kept treating me this way, and I told the teacher and the principal, and now you're doing this again. I refuse to let you continue to treat me this way. I don't know what the situation is, so we're just sort of filling in the blanks here. But I'm saying right now that it needs to stop. And so you can either fight me right now or choose to leave me alone. It's your choice. What's it going to be? And so it doesn't have to be word for word, but this is how we're tackling them mentally. Where your child at this point is standing up for themselves, showing that they're confident enough that they are even willing to fight if that's what's necessary, but they won't any longer put up with the bullying that has occurred. And so then it's up to the bully. Does the bully fight your child, or does the bully walk away and leave them alone? Hopefully, they walk away and leave them alone and they can see that your child means business. But let's pretend for a moment that that doesn't happen and your the bully swings on your child or tries to push or in some way cause physical harm. Okay? So when this happens, this is where the physical tackling comes into play. And this is the beauty of jujitsu. And this is where they would essentially tackle the person and hold them to the ground without hurting them, but they would control the situation. And at this point, too, they would want to negotiate. So they essentially, as the the fight is ensuing and the bully is trying to struggle and get the his or her way out of the situation, your child would then be holding the person down using leverage and just saying, will you stop bullying me? Are you going to stop bullying me? Will you leave me alone? And so depending on the situation, they might choose to hold the child down until a teacher comes, or they might decide to let them up, assuming the bully has convinced your child that they will leave your child alone. And so it sounds like maybe kind of extreme circumstance, but they didn't punch the kid, they didn't kick the kid, they didn't cause brain damage, they didn't break the kid's arm, they didn't choke them unconscious, although through martial arts they may learn all of those things, but they had an opportunity to control the situation without hurting them. So quick review on the three T's. It's pretty straightforward. It's talk, tell, and then tackle. And inevitably, though, they're going to get in trouble for this. So that's where it's also important to go over and role play what can be said when they're sitting in the principal's office and probably about to be suspended. How can they minimize the damage that they may have occurred by fighting? Because they will get in trouble for fighting. The schools tend to have a policy where, it's been a little while since I've covered this, so I can't think of the name of the policy. It's essentially, though, everyone gets in trouble. And so if you fight, zero tolerance policy. That was the term I was looking for. So the schools have that zero tolerance policy where both kids are going to get in trouble. As a parent, I would recommend you tell your child, as long as you followed all three steps and you did the three C's and the three T's, you will not be in trouble at home because I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. But they should not have skipped any steps. They shouldn't be the one creating the situation for that to apply. And then when it comes to the conversation in the principal's office, your child can explain all of the steps that they went through to try and overcome the situation in a peaceful manner. And so your child at that point can explain how they talked to the person bullying them about it in an assertive, calm, peaceful way. They can tell the principal that they have already talked to the principal about the situation. And then they can also explain that they chose to hold the bully down without hurting them, even though they were capable of doing so, in order to come to a peaceful resolution of the situation. So then, all things considered, They should get some sort of, I guess, minimal type of slap on the wrist, if you will. But even even if they are getting in trouble, they'll know that they did everything they could to do the right thing. So that kind of explains like our system that we run kids through when they deal with bullying. But something that really gets me that we don't talk about enough is what causes bullies to bully in the first place. And so a lot of what we do with trying to help kids overcome bullies involves them developing a strong self-esteem, self-worth, confidence, to be able to handle these types of situations. But the people that are doing the bullying, those are the ones that struggle the most in those areas. And it's often the very reason that they feel the need to bully others. And so I did a quick search even just to look up I've got the top 8 ways that I found. Although I don't think it's a very comprehensive list in any way, shape, or form, but I found 8 ways that explain why bullies bully anyways. um, Maybe two, you as a parent with whatever stage your child might be involved in, take these things as a form of education for maybe what not to do as a parent. That way you can make good choices to avoid having your child end up on either end of the spectrum. So why do bullies bully anyways? Number one, parents are uninvolved. Number two, parents are aggressive. They may be bullied by their peers. Number four here, they may be trying to fit in with others who bully. So that definitely kind of comes to mind with kids of the middle to high school age range, where it becomes increasingly more important for them to fit in socially and apart from um, their like caretakers that they've looked up to in the past. And so trying to fit in, but oftentimes that clique ends up being rather aggressive towards other people or other groups of people, and then sometimes it's a measure of fitting in, something I hadn't necessarily considered in a long time. Number five would be lack of rules in school. Of course, if you talk to the school, I'm sure they would disagree that they have the rules in place. But then it leads us to number six, which could be poor supervision. And it makes me question, too, how the school teacher and school administration is choosing to handle these types of situations. They may have certain policies in place, but are they following through with those? And in what way are they following through on those? Are they um, really seeking to help both people, or are they kind of washing their hands of their responsibility in the situation? Number seven, social aggression. So this is more frequently with, for instance, like teenage girls where they are almost like mentally abusing others to try and make themselves feel better. And then media models. And it seems like this has come up a few times recently, how much the Disney Channel terrifies me. um, I remember, well, it would be my ex's child began sounding an awfully lot like a TV show they were watching. And I may have done the same thing when I was a kid too and just never realized it. But remember, our brains, all of our brains are like computers. What we put in is what we get out. And so make a point to be feeding good things into your mind as well as your child's. So just because it's Disney doesn't mean it will keep them from avoiding any certain type of attitudes towards others. And then the thing that just really gets me though about bullies themselves is that they tend to be victims of, and victims themselves of stress and trauma, and um, and they themselves lack their own sense of self-worth. So as you're going through this process, and you might be role playing with your child or navigating the waters yourself of how to best handle the situation, um, try and instill in them not just the ability for them to protect their own sense of self-worth and their dignity and their physical safety, but hopefully we can impart in them like a certain degree of compassion for the people that they're dealing with. Help them recognize that the person picking on them probably has many of their own issues that they're struggling with. And then encourage your child to do the best they can to always take the high road, and and maybe even be a positive influence in that other child's life. So hopefully all of these points kind of gives you some type of direction when it comes to children dealing with bullies. And the final quote that came to mind, I had this sixth grade math teacher, and I won't say his name because his most remarkable characteristic was how he had the most noticeable stinky coffee breath of anyone we had ever met as a class. It was definitely remarkable, to say the least. But he had this very dry sense of humor, and I never knew if he was joking or not. He would always say, though, life is tough when you're a kid. And you know what though? It really can be, because as kids we're experiencing many things for the first time, and we're learning how to best cope with those. So hopefully you as a parent can take some of those practices that we mentioned before and role play with your child and help prepare them for situations that might come up throughout life. So I guess that's it. I don't know how it went. I probably stumbled on my words a lot. We're gonna keep trying it though. I'll get better every episode. My goal is actually to have guests on here, maybe starting out one at a time, but maybe then a few groups of people. Try and maybe get some friends that are familiar with either martial arts or personal development and coaching, that cover all of the various areas that we find valuable on the Warrior Revolution page, and and also eventually bring in some different experts from different categories to sort of uncover the most effective ways of solving things that are important to you. So if you have any suggestions ever about things that you would like to have covered, problems that you have, questions you want answered, or anything that you think would be valuable to share to the community, I would be super excited to do my best to create some content for it, and keep this ball rolling. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be editing and releasing the actual podcast episode soon. I know it's up on Spotify. I don't know if it's up on iTunes yet or not. I'll have to double check, but eventually it'll be on all of those platforms. So uh, thank you guys for being supportive. You rock. And remember too, you can, if you want to share your bullying story, you can leave a voice message. I left a little link in the comments there, so you can click on it, and I might even include it when I edit the episode here later. So check it out. Leave me a message. Hopefully that gave you some direction if you're a parent ever dealing with that. And you guys rock.